Can we talk about the story of just the entire album and obviously the record, right? Like there is a story here because it is a fight, right? I didn't know that there's a fight that goes on between you and the producer at one point.
It was John Rzeznik, right?
Yeah.
Of the Goo Goo Dolls.
Yeah. And that was an experience all of its own. Yeah. Me and Johnny. So Johnny Rzeznik, we initially met just to kind of write as a session, and then we ended up writing like 3 or 4 songs together. It was only supposed to be one, and like we were vibing. And he had never really produced at the time, and
like Goo Goo Dolls are flamethrowing at this point.
Dude,
right?
I mean,
like,
they're
my
hotter
hero. Than hot.
That was my hero. I was joking at the time. They said, if you could work with anybody in the world, like, who would it be? I said, Rob Thomas or Johnny Rzeznik or Dave Matthews. And they hit me back. I was like, yo, Johnny wants to meet you. I was like, all right. So I went to his house just to meet, play him some stuff I'd been working on. And then we ended up writing a song that afternoon. And then that turned into a bunch of songs. And I was like, dude, you're already kind of invested. Like, would you produce the album? So we do it. And then, so he's producing his first album with this young, artist who thinks he knows it all. He's already done it all, so he actually does know something. I'm young, naive, think I know it all, and this is my record. Here's how I want to sound like. So eventually, of course, naturally, that's going to turn into some tension because I wanted to do it my way. He's a successful rock star, he wants to do it his way. And then that turned into a thing. So eventually, Evan had to fly in from New York and sit us down before every session in the morning, and I'd be in one chair, I'd be in the other, like, okay, what are you guys working on today? How are you going to get it done? It was almost like marriage counseling of like figuring out how to finish this record because they had already spent so much money on it, and at that time it wasn't looking like it was going to get finished. And
what was the disconnect?
Like he had his ideas of how he wanted it to sound, and me as the artist at the time was very, very like, strong-minded of like, here's how I hear it, and it's my album. So at the end of the day, no one's going to hear the Ryan Cabrera Take It All Away record and go, oh, that sucks because Johnny Rzeznik. They're going to go, oh, that sucks because Ryan Cabrera. So, it was my name on it. So I thought, like, here's how it's going to be. Now, mind you, that was just, ignorance and not like understanding like the collaboration aspect of like, yo, it's give and take. And he had to learn that too. Like after the record was made, like we both like, we hated each other for a while during that. And then after like we saw each other at House of Blues, we just gave each other the biggest hug. And it was out, like respect of like, you know what, like you were right a lot of the times. I should have listened. And he had the same kind of, cognition of like, dude, that we both learned something from each other. We had something to give. We both had something to offer. And so we had to figure that out. But it created a tension in the music. And that's why I still to this day think that it was as successful as it was, is because of you could hear the tension in that record that was going on in real life.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's in the music. Like you can hear it.
I mean, does it come through on the way down?
Yeah. Yeah. It does. If you heard the demo,
I would love to.
Of On the Way Down, you'd be like, whoa. But it's good. You could hear the potential of the song, and you could be like, all right, I think this could be a hit song. But then when you hear like the record that we made, it's like, yo, that tension is real.
So John made the song into the song we know today.
Yes.
So
Johnny produced the whole first album. So that was quite the experience. I'd go home crying every day. Not every day, obviously, but all the times, yeah. I mean, there was my first album. It was like my baby. I was like, and now I'm all excited. I'm like, I'm making my first album, and he's just like, stop being a bitch. It was that kind of relationship. But he was hard on me, and I needed that. And now, like looking back at the time, you don't understand it. I was maybe 20 or 21.
He's still a kid.
Yeah. When we first started, I was like 19.
Like, I weirdly get that. Like, I worked very young, like being 15, 16 with like very old, really expert level people, but, deeply jaded who just knew what it was their way or the highway.
Yeah.
And collaboration wasn't really ingrained in who they are necessarily, right? Because they had done it and it worked really well. But it makes something great.
Yeah.
When it actually comes together and the two minds like find a flow.
I wouldn't have had it any other way.
It wouldn't have been
what it is. I grew
a
up a lot because of him. And he he'll probably never admit it, but I think he learned a lot about himself working on that album with me as well. So, because it got deep, like when you're making an album together, like especially back then, it was a little bit different than because, these days there's so much technology to do things quicker.
Yeah,
and
but you're together and it's
and we were, like,
vulnerable.
yeah, every day. It was like a relationship.
By the way, by chance, this is the universe. He happens to be here tomorrow
Oh my god.
on our show.
That's hilarious.
I'm like, well, I didn't know. I'm looking at the packet. I'm like, there's no fucking way that this
dude, it's
guy
wild.
produced
That's
the album.
crazy. I love it. Tell him I said hello. I mean, still one of my heroes. Can't believe I even got the chance to work with him. But at the time, you throw that out the door.
That
You're making your album. It was like this is my first album. This is the most important thing. I didn't look at him in that manner. And then after the fact, you're like, oh shit, that was Johnny Rzeznik. That's so cool.
Are you writing on the way down together, or do you like? How does who?
That one, no. Me and a couple of people wrote that in New York.
And you brought it to him.
Yeah. We brought him a bunch of, and then we wrote a song on the album together too. And funny story about that was, so he, some people know this, but like a lot of his stuff, he detunes his guitars. And so every song of his has like a different tuning. And so the first song we ever wrote, he's like, all right, just start untuning your strings. I'm like, huh? And I'm like, wait, I'd heard about this, that you do this. Because, if you learn how to play like Name or Slide, and you see how he does it, it's crazy what he does. And so we detuned the guitar, wrote this song, and then we went to go, we did the demo, we went to go make the album, and I was like, did anybody write down what our tuning was? Because it was completely random. He's like, no. I was like, I didn't either. So still to this day, I don't know how to play that song the way we wrote it. I mean, I figured out like chords, but it was never the way that we actually wrote it that day because my dumb ass, I was just like, Johnny Rzeznik told me to untune my guitar. I do it. I did it. We wrote a song, and I'm like, oh, I just wrote a song with Johnny Rzeznik. Never even thought like I probably should have noted down what we tuned that guitar to. So I'll never play it the way I wrote it. It's a random story, but